Hey everybody, Regwin here, and welcome to my BBDL Season 2 draft analysis video. This is a lower tier draft league, so this is a draft league where all the really good Pokemon aren't in it, and it's just the Pokemon that aren't as good, so it's just like the less good Pokemon on it, because it's lower tier. And so, yeah, anyway, this is a lower tier draft league that I'm in, and And yeah, anyway, let's get on to the draft for the Utah Mews. Anyway, let's get on with it. My first pick I decided to pick was Milotic. We had 60 points to spend on picks, and yeah, and my first pick I decided to pick was Milotic because I actually got skipped because I didn't know I was in the league originally. But then I discovered I was in the league because someone told me, and because like I wasn't getting the notifications on the lock screen on my phone to know I was in the league. But then someone told me I was in the league, so I discovered I was in the league. And once I discovered it, I decided to see what I could get that was still on the board that hadn't been taken from me being skipped. Apparently, I needed to make two picks at that point, so the first pick I made was Milotic. I was surprised Milotic was still on the board, and so I picked it. And Milotic gives me a really good bulky water type, considering that this is lower tier. It gives me a really good bulky water, and and it has Marvel Scale, so I can give it a Flame Orb and raise its defense with it, because a Flame Orb will burn it, and then it will raise its defense because it's burned as a Marvel Scale. Or I can run competitive, which means that if any of its stats get lowered, its special attack raises by stages, so that's a decent ability to run as well. And it gets reliable recovery as a bulky water type. It gets recover, which is good. And it's just all around a really good bulky water type. I can give it toxic. I can run Scald, Ice Beam. And it's all around just a really good bulky water type. And yeah, that's why I decided to draft Milotic. Now my second pick I wanted was, I saw that Arcanine was still on the board, and I was like, you know what? Let's take Arcanine because I wanted a decent fire type considering that this is lower tier, and I figured, well, Arcanine's going to be a really good fire type to have because there aren't a lot of good fire types, and Arcanine was one of the really good ones, so I decided to draft Arcanine. Which he gets Intimidate, which means that opponent's attack is lowered upon him entering the field. So that's really good. And he's just a decent fire type. He gets like Wild Charge, he gets reliable recovery in Morning Sun. And then he gets like Wild Charge, he gets Close Combat, he gets like fire type moves like Flare Blitz and stuff like that. And he gets Psychic Fangs, he gets Crunch. And yeah, he gets some really good moves, and he can be run mixed as well. Can be run mixed as well, so he can run. You can run him physical, or you can run him special. He's just an all-around really good Pokemon, and yeah, that's why I decided to draft Arcanine. Now my next pick, I wanted to get a decent Grass type, considering that this is lower tier. I wanted to get a decent Grass type, and I really wanted a Dark type too, and And yeah, I decided to go for Shiftry because I wanted a grass type and I wanted a dark type. And yeah, so I decided to go for Shiftry. Even though I won't be like really running Sun on this team, like uh Shiftry's just a good grass type to have because he's grass and he's dark and he gets some good grass type moves and some good dark type moves. And Shiftry's just a decent Pokemon for lower tier. He's a decent grass type to get in lower tier, Yeah, that's why I wanted Shift Trees, because he's a decent grass and dark type for lower tier, and yeah, that's why I decided to draft Shiftry. Now my next pick, I wanted a poison type, but I also wanted a fairy, and I saw that Wheezing Galar was still on the board, and I was like, you know what, let's take Galarian Wheezing because he's poison and fairy, and so I decided to take Galarian Wheezing because he's a decent poison and fairy type, and he gets some pretty good abilities. And yeah, he gets levitate like normal Weezing does. He does get levitate, uh, which means that can be immune to ground type moves, making it so that way his only weakness really is like psychic and then steel. Or I can give him neutralizing gas, which means that he is weak to ground, but he can ignore other abilities. So even though like a Pokemon has one ability, it can ignore that ability because of the neutralizing gas. Anyways, he's a really good poison and he's a really good fairy type, and he has really good defense, and he can run like Will-O-Wisp, he can run Toxic Spikes, he can run like fairy type moves, like he gets Strange Steam, he gets like Flamethrower, and yeah, that's why I wanted Galarian Weezing. He's a really good psychic fairy type, is a really good defensive Pokemon, and yeah, that's why I wanted Galarian Weezing. Now my next pick here, I wasn't really thinking about me already having a poison type in Galarian Weezing and me already having a dark type in Shiftry. So I ended up getting another poison and another dark type in Skuntank, which I guess is good because it gives me a grounded poison type, which means that if one of my opponents like sets toxic spikes, then I can remove them with Skuntank. Because if I run Levitate on Galarian Weezing, it doesn't count as being grounded, and I just think that Galarian Weezing doesn't count as being a grounded poison type in general. So having a grounded poison type in Skuntank is nice, because now I have a way of removing toxic spikes off the field. My opponents were to set up toxic spikes. But yeah, Skuntank's a decent Pokemon because it gives me a Pokemon. Skuntank has access to Flamethrower, it has access to like dark type moves and poison type moves, and yeah, and it's a defogger, which is nice. I think Shiftry might get defog, I'm not sure. But Skuntank gets defog, so I can remove the hazards if hazards are to get set up on the field. And Skuntank is just an all-around decent Pokemon with the Stench ability as a 10% chance to flinch its opponents. Uh, with its moves, like if it just has a 10% chance to flinch its opponents. Like Stench just gives Skuntank's moves a 10% chance to flinch the opponent's Pokemon. And yeah, that's why I drafted Skuntank, is because I didn't really think about having already having a poison type, and I didn't really think about having a dark type, but it does give me a grounded poison type in the end, and it gives me a defogger, and yeah, that's why I decided to draft Skuntank. Now my next pick I wanted a decent fighting type, and I figured this Pokemon would do better in this format than it has in other formats for me, and that Pokemon is Hitmontop. I've always wanted to use Hitmontop, but he doesn't do well for me in the higher tier draft leagues. I've only used him like not very much in the higher tier draft leagues, but when I did use him, he wasn't that good for me. But so yeah, I decided to draft Hitmontop in a lower tier draft league to see how he does for me, And so yeah. And he's also another intimidate user, so I can run intimidate on him to lower the opponent's attack stat. I can run technician on him to make Hitmontop's weaker moves stronger. like Hitmontop's weaker moves stronger if they're base 60 or weaker. I can make them stronger with Technician. And yeah, and Steadfast if he gets flinched or whatever. If he if he Okay, if he gets flinched, sorry, there's noise in the background and I wasn't sure if it was getting picked up by the noise gate. Anyway, on my mic that I set up on OBS. Anyway, he also gets Steadfast, which means if he gets flinched, I think his speed rises or his attack rises, something like that. Which is at least a decent ability, but I probably won't use that ability. I'll probably use Intimidate or Technician. But he's a really good fighting type, and he's a rapid spinner, so it gives me access to rapid spin, which means that I can remove hazards with rapid spin, which is nice. And yeah, it's a really good fighting type. Gets Intimidate and Technician, and yeah, that's why I drafted Hitmontop. Now my next pick, I wanted a really good normal type, and I wanted a normal type that's like decently bulky, and that's like pretty bulky, and I saw Licky Licky on the board, and I was like, you know what? Hey, let's drop Licky Licky. And so I decided to draft it. So I decided to see if I could get it, and I ended up getting Licky Licky. So yeah, I ended up getting Licky Licky, and which is good because he's like a really bulky normal type. He has decent special attack, and gives me access to Wish and Heal Bell, and yeah, he gives me access to Wish and Heal Bell, and not only that, I can run Oblivious on him to make it so he can't be taunted or whatever, or I can run Cloud9 on him to make it so that way weather effects do nothing. Make it so that way if my opponent sets up weather, it removes the effects of weather. Or I can, and yeah, that's why I decided to draft Licky Licky. Really bulky Pokemon, and the really bulky normal type, and I just wanted a normal type. The really bulky normal type, as I already said, and he gets decent coverage. I think he also gets knockoff, and that is why I drafted Licky Licky. Now my next pick, I was gonna pick something else, but it got sniped from me, and that Pokemon I was gonna draft was Sigilyph. I was gonna draft Sigilyph, but unfortunately it got sniped from me, so I saw that Xatu was still around, and I was like, you know what? I'll draft Xatu, because he's the same type as Sigilyph, but yeah, so I decided to draft Xatu instead of Sigilyph, because Sigilyph got sniped from me. But anyways, Xatu's still a really good Pokemon because it gets access to Magic Bounce, which is good, which means that opponents have to think about bringing hazards against me if they think I'm going to bring Xatu. Because if they try to set up hazards against me and Xatu's out in the field, and I have Magic Bounce on Xatu, which I most likely would, then Xatu would bounce back the hazards onto their side of the field because of Magic Bounce. And so yeah, it would make them think about like running hazards or status moves because it would get bounced back to their side of the field because of Magic Bounce, which is cool. So, which is good. So getting a Magic Bounce Pokemon. So getting a Magic Bounce Pokemon is with Xatu is cool, and Xatu gives me a flying type, which I didn't have before, and it also gives me a psychic type, which I also didn't have before, so that's nice. And Xatu gives me coverage for psychic and flying types, and it gives me like some grass type coverage too. Even though I already have shift rate, it still gives me like coverage for like ghost types because I don't have a ghost type, and it gives me a shadow ball user, and yeah, that's why I drafted Zatu. Now my final pick, I actually got skipped again, so unfortunately, I got skipped quite a few times in this draft, but unfortunately, the last Pokemon that I wanted was, I actually wanted Boltund, because I wanted a really good electric type and I wanted Boltund, but because I got skipped, Boltund got sniped from me, so unfortunately, I did not get Boltund, so I had to check what I wanted within the 5-point section. That was as many points as I had left, and the other electric type that was on the board was Magneton, who's electric, but he's also steel. So I ended up getting Magneton instead of Boltund, which I guess is okay, because Magneton, it gives me a steel type and it gives me an electric type, which I guess is good. But anyways, Magneton gets sturdy, which means that it can't be one shot. It'll always can't be one shot by one move, which is good. Which means that it can't be one hit KO'd, because sturdy will make it so that way it lives on 1 HP. Or it gets analytic, and because it's slow, like, it'll usually move last, which means that I could run analytic and its attacks would get boosted by analytic because it would move last, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, it gives me an electric Pokemon with electric type moves, and it gives me a Pokemon with steel type moves. It gives me electric and steel type moves, and it gives me electric and steel type coverage. And yeah, that's why I drafted Magneton, because Boltund got sniped from me, and like the best electric type on the board was Magneton. So that's why I drafted Magneton. So yeah, that's it for my BB. Sorry. And that's it for my BBDL into lower tier draft analysis. And I'll see you guys in the next video. See you guys then. Redwin out. By the way, I don't know when my week 1 match is going to be. I will be recording my matches for this league, but I do not know when my week 1 match is going to be. And if you're wondering, this league is a showdown league, so it will be done on showdown, but most likely on the sports showdown servers. So yeah, anyway, I don't know when my week 1 match is going to be, because it hasn't even been scheduled. The schedule hasn't even come out yet at the time of recording this video. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. See you guys then. Redwin out.